General Mariama was a courageous man, tall, swift, agile, and able. Indeed, at the earliest arrangement of Mau Mau movement, he was one of those who were arrested 1952-53, very early. And he was in Manyani camp. But he escaped. And it is said he walked all the way to Meru. Yeah, my name is Gerishon Mwiti, daktari. Nimesomea the whole issue of leadership and not management. It's leadership, classic leadership. So I love leadership. I teach it, I preach it, and I'm proud of it. I also protect its dignity. And I've loved leadership since my childhood. I can't remember when I was not a leader in my life. In the village with boys, in school, I've always been a leader up to this time. And in terms of where I come from a village in Meru called Kaderi. It is a village that hugs Mount Kenya on the eastern side of Mount Kenya. Mau Mau movement. The earliest memories of Mau Mau movement that I have was when my nephew was recruited into the movement. And he was called in general behind, meaning general behind. He was behind the army. When they were moving, he was always behind, and the others were in the front line. When he was recruited into the movement, that was a big surprise to all of us. And we wanted to know more about it. That was followed by a number of others who were younger but very energetic. They were also recruited into it. Then the oathing of Mau Mau movement in the village. They would come at night, slaughter a goat or a sheep to officiate the oathing itself. And I do remember one time when it was taking place in my home, in my house, I and my brother, we hid under the bed. And all this was taking place, and we heard all what was happening there. And I tell you, it was a serious oathing. Because the utterance itself was so convincing that you'll be asked what to do after that. And it stuck into one's mind. It was administered in Meru. I don't know whether you get this, but the wording was, Gankuga nama, and you repeat the same. I'm saying with all my sincerity, Gankuga nama, Oni, you mention your name. Me, from now on, this is my lifestyle, and this is the way I will live, and that's what I go doing in the village and everywhere I go. In other words, you are making a major promise. It is a vow one was making at that time. So those are the words. Because we were hiding, we couldn't see exactly what was going on in the sitting room, but we could hear. I'm saying with all my sincerity, this is what I'm going to do. And that is really all I can remember now. We were hiding because first of all, fear. We were afraid of these people because the way they dressed was threatening. The hairstyle was also threatening. They were not combing their hair, and they looked really very strange and very threatening. So we hid under the bed. Women started getting into the forest a bit later. And I know one of them who is still living. And she's very strong, but she is now in her 80s and going to her 90s. And she was actually one of them in the forest, fighting. Colonial government started spreading, announcing, telling people that anybody who is associated with the Mau movement will be arrested. All that we had, and it was very, very well organized. They had papers which would be dropped on the roadside for people to read. In actual fact, some of them were dropped from the air by plane. They would go around dropping papers in the area. And that is one. The other area of concern was when the government intensified the war against the Mau Mau fighters in the forest. They were reinforced by a British army. They were called Johnny, young soldiers. And I can remember one of the camp was actually was established in our school compound. This was white. The other one of African, that's the African Rifles, East African Rifles, was actually in my village. And this involved people like India Mini were there, and people like Muringe were there. General Muringe, then they were young people. And I remember I used to read for them a newspaper called Sunday Post, because they couldn't read. And in the village, I was the only one who could read. I would go there and read all the news of the day from there. And I would read for them. They all gather around me, and I would read that. And I would get dates and chocolate and go there with them home. A young boy in standard 3, standard 4.
Reading to soldiers.
To soldiers.
Amazing.
They camped there with the tents and so on and so forth. I think I was then almost in standard 4, going to standard 5, when it was announced that all people living closer to the forest will move away from the forest 3 miles, because our village borders Mount Kenya forest, and all the Mau Mau soldiers and the fighters were in the forest. That's where they were. So we were told to move, and we were put in concentration camps, large ones. They were buildings were put in line so that soldiers can see between the line that open space. In case some people are running here and there, they could be seen. And there were quite a number of camps because we were too many. And that is where we are coming. You work during the day in your farm, and in the evening you all move to the camp, to the concentration camp. And that's where I lived, I think, for almost 2-3 years. 1954, 55, and 56.
Was food an issue?
No, it wasn't an issue because people maintained their shambas. You work there during the day, and at night you carry from your garden into the concentration camp. As long as you withdrew in the evening, you are not supposed to be in your home in the villages, in your home itself during the night, because there was a curfew. And the soldiers would roam around with vehicles to ensure that everybody was in the camp. If you are seen out of the camp at night, it meant bullet. It disrupted the way of life of people. In actual fact, it was like being moved from a rural area into the city, where you are expected to behave in a certain way, where there were rules and regulations, which in the villages we didn't have them, apart from the cultural lifestyle that people lived. So there we had toilets or pit latrines, which were almost 50 feet from the villages. And for men to go to the toilets, when women and the children are watching you, that was something hated so badly. And many men would go in the bush instead of going to those toilets. That was quite it disturbed many people. But it was also a lesson, because after that, when the people returned home, they dug pit latrines. Before, people would go in the bushes here and there. But after that, pit latrines were almost mandatory in every family, which meant good health anyway. That was one. The other one was bringing people together, young men and women, young and old, bring them together in a concentrated camp. It wasn't taken easily because of one reason. People living in Majengo, in Meru town, were called Waswahili, Wahuni. So Uhuni was actually mentioned in the camp, that you are bringing people together so that they become wahuni, kama Waswahili wa mjini. Because living in town actually was associated with all kinds of bad things. When you become a difficult boy in the village, you run away in the Meru, you go to the town and hide yourself there. Even those who did not want to be circumcised, they would go to the town and hide there. So going to town was not taken lightly. It was one way of hiding dirty things and bad things from a person. There are certain people who actually remain in the city, they don't go to the village. They they started little businesses in the marketplace. So some of them actually had to sell their little plot in the village and stay in the concentration camp, which was always very close to a market. So shopping started spreading. Many shops started spreading around the marketplace. There was also the whole question of restaurants, which were not there before. In actual fact, that was the first time that I smelled the smell of a bread, because they started baking in the market, and you could smell it. European settlers, they stopped spreading towards Meru, almost 10 miles from Meru town, in a place called Kibirisha. That was a boundary. And the reason for this was that because they wanted to spread deep into Meru, wherever they went, because these settlers, when they were settling, they would ask, who owns this land? Wherever they went. If it was not owned by anybody, they would take it. But if it belonged to somebody, they would not dare take it. So when they came to the boundary of Meru, rural Meru, wherever they asked that question, who owns this land, then Jorincheke would say that belonged to Jorincheke. And that's what actually stopped Europe, the British settlers from spreading deep into Meru town, because of Jorincheke.
Which raises the questions
of
what was the main grievance that the Meru people had against the white people. Why did they go into the forest?
Part of the reason was that those who went into the World War II, they came back, and particularly in the area, I can count not less than maybe 5 or 6 men who were in World War II. They came with a new mind. They were thinking differently. They are the ones who took their children and demanded their children to go to school. So their mind actually influenced a lot of our people there. Now, some of them were not only local people, they were connected with Nairobi and the people outside Meru itself because of the connection they had during the war. Some of them went to Burma, others went to Somalia. They went to different places and they were put together. So they learned a lot and they came with that knowledge and that mindset. They were now seeing Kenya as Kenya, not Meru as Meru people. Earlier on, people were talking of Meru as a nation. But now they started seeing Kenya because of meeting other people from other parts of Meru. So that is what actually excited them. And that's what led into thinking about Mau Mau. But land was not the only reason why people went into Mau Mau movement. There was mistreatment. A young man working for a Mzungu was called a boy. And that was a big disturbance to many Meru young people. To be called a boy,
an old man,
yes, to be called a boy, it was very disturbing. The employees of the European working in their kitchen, in their garden, and working in other places around them. When you are called a boy, when you are grown up, in Meru culture, that's an insult. And they didn't like it. So they had that against the whites, and they didn't like it at all. Secondly is the whole question of money. Money the way it was introduced in Meru was very mysterious, because they would throw money in the ground expecting people to rush for it. But Meru young people, or Ndaka, they will not, you can't, because of the way we were brought up, you can't rush to grab something. It must be presented. And what they did was that when the money was thrown in the air, some people would dare go and pick that coins and go with it home. And then a few of them would pick it and go with it home. When they will be called for another meeting of the kind. No. Those who pick the coins, when they come for the next meeting, whoever came with a coin, holding a coin, was given a cow. So, to them, a coin meant a cow. When they were called again, they came in large numbers because they were coming for cows. And instead of getting the cow, they were told that these coins are not available here. They're in Nanyuki. And that's how young men went to Nanyuki to start working for settlers there to get those coins, because a coin meant a cow. Yes. So they were attracted into that.
There was a man called General Roku.
Yeah.
What do you know about General Roku?
General Roku was almost closer to my village, not far from my village. And I think his son, we were together in school. General Roku was in the Second World War. And after the World War, he settled here in Nairobi. And when Kenyatta started talking about Mau Mau and about the freedom fighting and so on, General Roku was one of those who were very close to him. At the Kamukunji in 1946, General Roku was there to listen to Kenyatta speaking. Indeed, the oathing in Nairobi was essentially done by General Roku, Makongeni area, and Makongeni was actually very central in the oathing of people in Nairobi. So when in 1952, I don't know whether this affected the Kikuyus who were in Nairobi, but all men in Nairobi were repatriated back to Meru.
It did, it affected them.
Yeah, it affected them. Yes, and you are caught in the street because you didn't have your identity card, Kipande. You are supposed to carry Kipande wherever you are. So when they open it and they read your name, you are put in a lorry. They didn't care what you have at home, where you stay. You are put in a lorry, and when you are enough to be evacuated, you will be transported to Meru. So they lost a lot of things here. And Roku was one of them who was repatriated to Meru. And when he came ready with the mind of Mau Mau. And before then, him, Kimathi, and I can't remember his name, but he's Muhammad from Membu. He was a Muslim. They are the three people who literally organized the young men to get into the forest. And Roku, Kimathi, and that gentleman from Membu were the people who agreed on how to actually get into the war. Kimathi was to take the whole of Mount Kenya West and the Nyandarua Mountains. Roku was to take north of Mount Kenya, that is all the way to Nanyuki, and all the way to the boundary of Embu and Meru. That is Mount Kenya East and the north. Then Muhammad was to take, we'll check that name later on, we'll take the southern end of Mount Kenya, because the forest was really the hiding place. That's the only place they could hide and organize themselves. And they decided on that, and that happened. But Roku, when the war began and the fighting was intense, the Njonese were in Meru and were in that area, Kadari area. General Roku was one of the first people to die. And that's why we don't hear anything about it. There were newspapers to write about him, so he died and forgotten. but he was very instrumental in getting the Mau movement in Meru and also participating in the whole Mau Mau movement in Kenya. Kenyatta asked him to represent him to Haile Selassie in Addis Ababa. And Roko traveled all the way to Addis Ababa. And what he had, what he saw was so overwhelming that when he came here, he told Kenyatta that we have to fight. Because for him to see an African saluting another African was unthinkable. Because then no African could be saluted. It was only white who were being saluted in the army and in the police. So for him, when he went to Addis Ababa and he saw people saluting Haile Selassie, it was just overwhelming. He came and said, that is great. But Haile Selassie told Roko, please, go and ask Kenyatta to send you to Kampala and see Kabaka and how they run their government. Because the idea was, how do they run government as Africans? And Kenyatta did that. And Roko went all the way to Kampala and he came back. And his message was, we can go to the forest. Wow. Yeah, that's how actually the whole movement of going to the forest started. Mwaliama, I don't know him very well, but we used to hear about him. They were actually junior to General Roko. And General Mwaliama was a courageous man, tall, swift, agile, and able. Indeed, at the earliest arrangement of Mau Mau movement, he was one of those who were arrested, 1952-53, very early, and he was in Manyani camp. Among many people who were taken from the rural area in Kikuyu and the Embu and Meru, he was one of the prisoners in Manyani. But he escaped. And it is said he walked all the way to Meru. How he managed to walk through the Tsavo National Park to Meru, it's something else. But he managed it. And he is the one who almost took over from Roko in our area. And he was very organized. And the songs were composed to praise him because of his brilliant way of managing things. And when we got independence, in actual fact, he felt that he was to be the Major General of Kenya Army. But when it failed, because definitely they couldn't do much because of limitation in education and the modern military methods and whatnot, he felt this is not the independence they wanted, and he went back to the forest.
That's General Baimungi.
General Baimungi, and he went to a lot of people following him. They had cows and goats in the forest, and that's what they were depending on. And when the Kenyatta requested him to surrender and to give up, and he said, no, this is not the kind of independence that we wanted, we expected. In actual fact, Baimungi was shot in the forest by Kenya police. They surrounded him, and he couldn't simply surrender. And he was shot and died in the forest. Yeah. The whole of 1953, I was in Standard 3. I was seeing dead people at the Kadari market because when they were killed in the forest, they would come and they spread them, they lay them down there for people to see, to threaten them, to tell them if you go there, this is what will happen to you. I was seeing a dead body almost on daily basis going to school. And I remember seeing a girl, a woman, among the men. That memory and that vision has remained in my mind ever since. So the response of the villagers was that, you see, there were those who were loyal to the Mau Mau movement. They were the ones who were taking food to the Mau Mau in the forest. Or when they come to the village, they will hide them. And indeed, one of those who survived because my father said you can't shoot him. He's still alive, and I think we'll interview him. He was in the forest. So the royalists who were loyal to the Mau Mau movement would cook food and deliver it at night to them in the forest. And it worked. The government, meaning the chief and the soldiers and the others, were trying to find out how does this work. It was one of the top secrets that they kept. And it went on. And out of that, they say that they are going now to create a barrier for people from getting food to the Mau Mau or Mau Mau getting to the forest to get from the forest and going to the village for food. And a ring of people standing every 10 feet was created. The whole of Mount Kenya was surrounded by people. Meru, Nanyuki, Nyeri, Kiambu, no, Muranga, Embu, all that way. It was created. Every 10 feet, a soldier. And these soldiers were those who are loyal to the government, the colonial government. They tried, because they say that let's starve them in the forest and they will die, or they will come out of themselves. But it also failed. And Mau Mau continued.
There was a lot to eat in the forest.
Yeah, they knew how. Even those who were there, who were guarding themselves, some of them were Mau Mau people. Or Mau Mau people. Yeah. So it failed miserably. Yes. Yeah. So when we were brought to the concentration camp, they thought also that will help. It didn't. And the Mau Mau movement continued. Yeah. The British, the way the colonial masters managed the country here disturbed people deeply. They were against it. Parallel schools, parallel different salaries. When you pay tax, which does not benefit you, because then everybody was to pay tax, whether you are earning a salary or not. They were calling it the poor tax. Yeah, as long as you are now of age, you had to pay a tax, whether you want it or not. In actual fact, that is what led many young men from Meru to come to Nairobi, because you had to pay tax. And you couldn't go to the village without a receipt to show that you have paid the tax. So, because of paying tax, which you don't see its activities in the village, our schools were poor. When you go to Nairobi and see these wonderful schools, in Meru there was a school, in Nyeri there was a school, beautiful school, that disturbed them deeply. It is injustices and unfairness. That is what actually prompted the issue. If the colonial master came here and they say that, okay, we have come, let us sit down and discuss how we are going to live in Kenya, I tell you, they would still be here. But the way they came, they were very proud, very pompous. They thought that they were just the masters. Do you know that it is only recently when people passing through the district commissioner's office in Meru, they could not take off their hat. Because then, whether the DC is around or not, the moment you come closer to that building, you take your hat, because the DC is there, and then walk. Those were some of the issues which they were very much against. Secondly to that is like Meru town. The European lived in certain areas which were very good. Indian were living in certain areas which were very good. And they were not allowed to have a shop, for example. For an African was not allowed to have a shop nearer to the city center. You are to be away from the city center 3 miles. That's why you are allowed to have a shop. You will also not be allowed to grow a lot of coffee or tea, because mass production would withdraw African from harvest maize and coffee for European. So you are not allowed to have a big land where you concentrate and spend a lot of time working on it. You are to do a little thing in your places so that you can go somewhere else to get something for your family. Yeah, those are some of the reasons this happened. There was a lot of propaganda going on, telling people that these are our enemies. Move away from there. There were also royalists, those who are already with the government, the soldiers, the askaris, the askaris and others. They also come from the village where other people lived. And anybody, you know, there was people who were calling Komerena. Komerena were the people who were spies of Mau Mau in the village. So if you spoke against the Mau Mau movement, they will isolate you. And I know one person, he was among the chief's elders who spoke so strongly against Mau Mau. But then were not moved to the camp. He retreated home, his home. The following day was found dead. One of the tallest man in the whole area is actually a relative of, you don't know him. He said that kuna these poor, weak people who are in the forest, he despised them in the marketplace somewhere. He was a very tall. Whoever comes, I'll hold him and drop him down and step on his chest. That very evening, they came in numbers and was cut finger, every part of body was cut into pieces. You couldn't recognize him. His name was Gatunguru. He was a very tall man, very huge. He was very proud of himself, and he said that no one can threaten me here. But they came at night in numbers. They forced themselves into his house, and he was chopped into pieces.
So it is those kind of...
Yeah, there was a threat from the Mau Mau also for those who are against them. The Meru people was totally committed to the Mau Mau movement. And I'm speaking just of one area, Kaderi, which was really the concentration because of General Ruko and a few others who came. Other areas have their own stories to tell. But there was a total commitment to this, and very many people went into the forest because of that. And all this came from Nairobi, because on General Ruko association with Kenyatta, he happened to be at Kamukunji in 1946. And the oathing of Nairobi people for the Mau Mau movement was totally associated with General Ruko. So that actually brought this commitment we are talking about. And many people sacrificed, and they died as a result of that. The other contribution towards this is the African Independent Church. It came, and Nathani Mokonga, who was the first bishop, he studied at Kidunguri. And I think that church was the second from Kidunguri in Kaderi. It is still there, even today. Then the schools. People were yearning for education, and there were no schools. For example, the whole of Kaderi area, we had only one school for many years. So they wanted to go to school because Solomon Magambo, who was the first Mumeru to go to Makerere, he came from Kaderi. And there were songs composed. And when he went to London and came back, songs were composed about him, saying that his father took education seriously. And he took his son to school at Kaderi, Kaga, Alansa School, Makerere. And we're talking about 1932. And he came, and he was the first, we call it DA, district assistant, not DO. DO was a senior position, which was occupied by a white. So Solomon Magambo had a big influence to the community. His father was a senior chief, was a chief. And so the family really influenced a lot of us. Although Solomon himself was not very committed to this matter because he was in the government. was the Mumeru who became African assistant. That was a great honor, and we were proud of it. In actual fact, if he didn't die, Solomon would have been possibly, he would join politics together with Akina Madu and Akina Oginga Odinga and others, and become one of the top leaders here, or chief secretary, because he was in administration. But somehow he died very early also, very early. The connection between Meru, Embu, and the Kikuyu, I think, is historical. There is a connection somewhere. It's only that perhaps we have not dug into history to establish that. But we had a terrible war, a terrible famine around 1920. It's called Impare Kiaramu. It's a sun that continued for 3 years. And many Meru people died. And they were saved by Kikuyu. People from Nyeri were bringing produce from Nyeri to Meru, and they will go back with goats. And there is that connection. In actual fact, there is a saying that the Kibaki might have been born in Meru, because the movement of Kikuyu towards Meru was stopped actually by settlers. So that land bridge which separates Meru and Kikuyu is the whole of Timau and Narumoro. Otherwise, there was a connection. There was a trading meetings around that area. So that could have triggered that. Secondly is the language. Boran, Somali, and the rest in the north, we don't communicate at all in terms of language. Thirdly is there is a big chunk of land which is very dry, and no one lives there. So even the movement would have been very difficult, eating and drinking. There was no river. For example, from Meru all the way to beyond the Siuru, there is no river where people could even get water to drink. So that could have been also another reason for that. So the connection, I remember a story told of a Kikuyu fellow who came and he exchanged beans with a goat. And when he left, he said, on my way back, I'll collect my goat. When he went back, some people said that, no, we are going to take his goat and he can't come here again. We will take his seeds, we will take his cereals which they brought in exchange, and the goat is left here, we are not going to let it go. But what says in the village, he said, you can't. It can't happen. And they said the goat must be kept here until the Kikuyu comes and take it. So there is that connection. And also remember the relationship between Roko and Kenyatta. So there was that connection as well. Yeah. So going north to Somali and to Boran and to the rest of people in the north was almost impossible. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.